Hey guys, tonight we slip off a pitching mailboat and onto the slick, wave-lashed rock optimistically marked on Admiralty charts as Cape Despair, home to one stubborn lighthouse, a single weather-chapped keeper, and, most importantly, a regiment of whiskered cats who claim to forecast Atlantic fog better than any modern satellite. The lantern tower above moans every time a wet nor'easter slams against its glass panes, gulls shriek like rusty hinges overhead, and each salty gust tastes of iron and half-remembered shipwrecks. You probably won't survive this landing without a sturdy set of sea legs or, failing that, the good graces of the resident feline staff. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe fluff your pillows, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your boots land on stone slick as eel skin, and the first official greeter is not the keeper, but a stout marmalade cat whose fur billows against the gale. She circles your ankles twice, judging your balance like an unofficial customs officer, then flicks her tail toward the tower as if to say, "Follow me, landlubber." You oblige, trudging past rusted mooring rings and half-buried lobster pots while gulls wheel overhead, their cries swallowed by pewter mist. Each creak of the wooden gangway vibrates through your legs, reminding you that solid ground is relative out here. Inside the lighthouse base, damp granite blocks sweat lantern light. You inhale the sharp perfume of kelp, old kerosene, and freshly brewed determination. A squat iron stove ticks in the corner, its pipe rattling whenever a rogue gust slaps the shutters. The cat, let's call her Captain Whiskers, hops onto a coil of rope, blinks in regal slow motion, and resumes her vigil toward the door. You get the distinct impression she has already memorized tomorrow's barometric graph. Did you know cats were once listed as essential equipment on 19th century Canadian lighthouses, right beside spare wicks and lifeboats? Their official role was rodent control, their unofficial one, morale officer and living forecast model. Old keepers swore a restless tail or sudden kitchen floor flop predicted fog 3 hours out, while flattened ears meant gales within the hour. Tonight, Captain Whiskers sits upright with whiskers angled forward, fair weather by feline decree. You shrug off your sea-damp coat, pin it to a peg, and let the distant thrum of breakers settle into the background hum of your mind. With every rise and fall of the Atlantic, the tower itself seems to breathe, inhale on the swell, exhale as water slides back over jagged shale. You follow that rhythm, allowing your shoulders to loosen and your jaw to unclench. Somewhere overhead, the giant Fresnel lens rotates with a sleepy click, pause, click, throwing fat beams that carve golden tunnels through swirling fog. For a heartbeat, the fog answers, glowing like spun sugar, then swallows the light again. Footsteps scrape on iron treads, and the keeper finally appears, a wiry silhouette backlit by amber lamplight on the spiral stairs. He nods the weather-chapped greeting of someone who hasn't spoken aloud since the last supply schooner and beckons you upward, though Captain Whiskers has already darted ahead, tail raised like a pennant in a feline parade. Up you climb, narrow steps railing cold against your palm, stone walls beaded with condensation. Halfway up you notice names etched into chipped paint. Anna 1931, Rory 1954, and a mysterious paw print whose date is smudged by time. At the watchroom, shutters rattle like dice in a giant's fist. The keeper pours 2 tin mugs of something he calls coffee, but that tastes more like brackish courage. You sip, politely choking on both the grit and the kindness. Captain Whiskers plants herself squarely on tomorrow's tide chart. The keeper chuckles, a sound as coarse as sea salt yet warm, and mutters that if the cat faces northwest we're safe, but if she turns southeast we'd better lash everything down. Tonight she faces true north, tail curved like a comma that promises an unfinished story. You allow the scene to settle, lamp glass singing, tea kettle wind, foghorn beyond the breakers droning a note so low it vibrates your ribs. Every sensory thread weaves into a blanket of calm, and ironically, despite the tower's ceaseless sway, you feel steadier here than you did on shore. Perhaps isolation itself is the trick. Fewer people, fewer expectations, just wind, water, and one small cat presiding over the weather. As minutes stretch, subtle cues emerge. The brass barometer needle hesitates. Condensation on the lantern warms to gentle drips, and gulls that once shrieked now hunker silent on the rocks below. Captain Whiskers yawns and curls into a neat loaf. The keeper nods as though she's signed off on the forecast. You reach to scratch behind her ears. Coarse fur, warmth like banked coals, and she rewards you with a slow blink that translates to welcome aboard. Outside, waves slam and sigh, but inside this turning prism of light, everything slows. Your breathing synchronizes with the beam's rotation. Inhale on the flash, exhale in the dark. Somewhere in that rhythm, tension you didn't know you carried drifts away, dissolving like sea foam at sunrise. You picture the horizon when the fog finally lifts, pale gold hugging distant fishing boats, bobbing like toy ducks. Whether Captain Whiskers calls it correctly hardly matters. Waiting itself becomes the luxury. The keeper raises his mug in silent toast. You mirror the gesture, warmed by camaraderie and bitter coffee. Words feel unnecessary. Only the hush of waves, the heartbeat of light, and the faint purr of a cat who, for tonight at least, keeps Cape Despair remarkably calm. The tower's iron spine groans beneath your boots as you climb again, chasing Captain Whiskers and two junior apprentices. Midshipman paws an old one-eye toward the lantern deck. The air thins to something like chilled saltwater vapor mixed with lamp oil, and each breath feels as though you're sipping brine from a crystal goblet. The keeper's coffee still burns in your veins, but the cats move with such deliberate certainty that you forget about caffeine and focus on decoding their secret language of paws and whiskers. They stop every few steps to sniff mortar seams, tails twitching like telegraph needles, then bound onward in perfect harmony, 3 stripes of living barometer tape. Higher up, the stairwell narrows until it's less a staircase and more a corkscrew jammed inside a lighthouse pepper shaker. The brass handrail is warm where the lantern's heat seeps through, yet cool where Atlantic fog claws in through narrow vents. You discover the cats gravitate to those vents, pressing noses to the mist, collecting data as diligently as any meteorological sensor. Their ears splay outward, collecting pressure readings the way your phone gathers notifications, except theirs arrive with fishy breath and 0 battery drain. You reach the service platform, eyes blinking against the sudden dazzle of the Fresnel lens. 12-foot prisms catch the lamplight and fling it out to sea in broad golden swords, each blade rotating like a sleepy carousel. Between flashes, you glimpse your reflection, wind-tangled hair, salt-crusted collar, and a soft smile you didn't realize you were wearing. Captain Whiskers leaps to a narrow parapet, planting herself like a hood ornament, tail straight, body tense, ears swiveling toward the unseen horizon. Midshipman Paws scampers behind her, quickly mirroring the stance. Old One-Eye curls beneath the cleaning bucket, conserving energy for something only he can sense. A sudden tail thump reverberates through the platform. Thud, thud, pause, thud, thud, pause. You jump in spite of yourself, but the keeper appears from below, lantern in hand, nodding sagely. 2 thumps, restful pause means a pressure dip and likely drizzle, he mutters, rubbing the sleep from his beard. You arch an eyebrow. He shrugs. She's rarely wrong. Did you know meteorologists in the 1880s collected lighthouse cat observations alongside wind speed and barometer readings? Crews filled entire ledgers with notes like, Mr. Tibble's unusually quiet, expect calm seas, data that modern climate historians still sift for regional pattern clues. The raw numbers have gaps, but the anecdotal pause-on-deck reports form an oddly reliable breadcrumb trail through maritime weather records. You step closer to Captain Whiskers, careful not to block her line of sight through the glass. She flicks an ear without looking at you, as though filing your presence under harmless ballast. Midshipman Paws echoes the tail thump pattern, clearly an enthusiastic intern eager to please. Below, waves slap stone in lazy repetition, yet far offshore, the black water wears a faint pewter sheen that wasn't there earlier. You note it, just as the cats seem to do, and feel empathy for sailors who watched those same omens, with nothing but instinct and a feline advisory board to guide them. Historians still argue whether lighthouse keepers truly trusted the cats, or just humoured them for company, you remark aloud, half to yourself, half to the rotating lens. The keeper chuckles. We humour whoever keeps us alive, he says, tapping a brass plate near the lamp. Be it engineer, saint, or whiskered oracle. Wind slashes across the lantern deck, rattling guy wires like out-of-tune violins. Captain Whiskers lowers her haunches, tail tucked. A new signal. The keeper's brow furrows. That means the drizzle might grow teeth, he translates. You imagine drizzle with literal dentures and nearly choke on a laugh. But humour aside, the outer horizon now blends with sky in a seamless smear of slate, and gulls that earlier rode thermals now disappear entirely. Nature cross-checks the cat's forecast. The keeper hands you a rag and a bottle of diluted vinegar. Lens needs wiping, he says. You realise this task matters for more than sparkle. Any smudge refracts light differently, potentially misleading ships. As you polish, you watch Captain Whiskers pace. 6 measured steps, pause, then a sudden rear leg shake, as though dismissing an unhelpful thought. Midshipman Pause shadows her every move, scribbling the feline equivalent of footnotes onto the stone with damp paw prints. Old One-Eye, meanwhile, emerges from his bucket alcove, yawns like a barn door, and ambles over to press his single blue eye against a ventilation slot. He releases a low growl, less menace, more barometric complaint. The keeper frowns. He growls only for thunder. A glance toward the horizon supports him. That smear of slate now wears a darker stripe, almost violet, pulsing with distant lightning you can feel more than see. Your rag slows. The tower seems to tilt, though logic tells you it's the world outside that has started to heave. Wind scavenges the platform, plucking at coat sleeves, while spray leaps high enough to pepper the glass with cold kisses. You tighten a bolt on the lamp's guardrail. Routine, steady motions. Yet your heartbeat flutters like a trapped gull. Then Captain Whiskers resumes the double thump pattern, but faster, as though urging you to finish chores before the storm door slams shut. These small signals transform the lighthouse into a living organism. Cats for nerve endings, humans for muscle, lens for sight. You entertain a whimsical image of the whole structure walking across the Atlantic on stone legs, guided by feline neurons, flicking tails instead of synapses. The keeper must see something similar in your grin, because he raises an eyebrow. You decide not to share the vision. Some fantasies are best left flickering in lamplight. The first raindrops hit the glass in needles of silver. Lightning strobes once, briefly revealing a towering wall of cloud to the south. The cats scatter. Old One-Eye dives for the bucket. Midshipman Pause, squeezes behind a fire axe. And Captain Whiskers holes up under a brass console after giving you a disapproving glance for lingering in the open. Message received. You duck beside her, crouching in cramped companionship amid oil cans and rag bundles. From this vantage, the lamp's glow diffuses through the console slats, bathing both of you in warm stripes of amber. Captain Whiskers' purr starts like a diesel engine on idle, vibrating through the metal into your ribs, until even the grumble of distant thunder becomes less alarming. Storm before dawn, the keeper observes, kneeling nearby. Cats called it first. He passes around a tin of ginger biscuits, the kind that tastes stale on shore but divine at sea. Crumbs pepper your coat, which Captain Whiskers judiciously harvests with her tongue, never missing a morsel. Outside, rain intensifies, beating drum patterns on the lantern roof. Inside, 3 humans and 3 cats settle into watchful silence, measuring time by the slow rotation of light and the steadier purr of feline weather prophets. You watch the beams sweep fog like a colossal hand reassuring the night, and each pass leaves the horizon fractionally less frightening, the storm less like a beast and more like an agreed-upon ritual everyone must observe. Tail thumps translate into wind speed, purrs into barometric lullabies, growls into thunder warnings, an entire lexicon written in fur and whiskers, yet somehow clearer than any printed forecast. And as lightning flickers again, Captain Whiskers lifts her head, blinks once, and, miracle of miracles, presses it gently against your shin, as if awarding you a novice badge in cat meteorology, Congratulations, recruit, the weather has accepted you into its whispered fraternity. Grey dawn arrives disguised as leftover fog, slipping through hatch seams and pooling across the watchroom floor like a lazy house guest who forgot to knock. You blink awake in the hammock where you dozed off, swaying inches from Captain Whiskers, who occupies your pillow with regal indifference, and feel the whole tower breathing easier. The storm has limped away toward the open Atlantic, leaving only a persistent drizzle that patters on the panes like slow applause. Somewhere below, the keeper winds the brass clockwork that rotates the lens. The soft whir rises through the iron ribs, reminding you that routine is the lighthouse's heartbeat. You ease out of the hammock, careful not to disturb the cat-shaped paperweight at your head. Captain Whiskers stretches, a long liquid arc, then decides elevation trumps loyalty and leaps to a nearby shelf stacked with logbooks. Her purr fades into the clicking pages as you descend the spiral steps, your boots clanging a quiet reveille on iron treads. The watchroom smells of extinguished oil, salt-damp wool and something sharper. Freshly ground beans. You follow your nose to the galley, where the keeper presides over the stove like a high priest of questionable breakfast. On the scarred wooden counter sits the legendary seal grey coffee. He brews it in an enamelled pot with chips along the rim, tossing in a pinch of sea salt to tame the bitterness, though you suspect it's to remind the brew where it came from. Steam coils upward, fog meeting fog, and the first sip singes your tongue before blooming into smoky comfort. The keeper winks. Not good coffee, he admits, but honest. You raise your mug in silent salute, savouring the briny undertone that no cafe on land would dare serve. Dawn Ritual 1. Sweep soot. An iron bucket waits beside the stove, half filled with charcoal dust from last night's lamp burn. You arm yourself with a wire brush and climb back to the service platform, each step echoing like a church bell in the hush. The lens, heroic and hungover, glints weakly in dawn light. You scrub soot from its lower prisms, watching black streaks smear then vanish beneath vinegar. Tiny rainbows dance across the glass. Apologies from the storm for its rude visit. While you work, Midshipman Paws prowls the catwalk outside, paws dunking into puddles with surgical precision. He pauses to lick each paw, cleansing or perhaps tasting the storm's residue. Old One Eye remains downstairs, guarding the galley as if coffee fumes require feline oversight. Captain Whiskers appears on the platform railing, tail curling into a question mark. She observes your scrubbing, unimpressed but tolerant, offering supervisory blinks that mean you missed a spot. You correct the oversight. She blinks again. Approval granted. Dawn Ritual 2. Polish brass. The keeper presents a rag and a tin of paste that smells like lemons, married to shipyards. You massage paste into the handrail, circular strokes, coaxing dulled metal into sunrise gleam. As you work, gulls re-enter the soundscape, their cries made half-hearted by drizzle. The beam no longer slices urgent holes in darkness. Instead, it lazily sweeps greying sky, a lighthouse stretching after a long night shift. Did you know? 19th century lighthouse manuals mandated exactly 3 daily polish sessions, dawn, midday and dusk, to prevent salt corrosion on brass fittings. Keepers joked that the towers shone brighter inside than out. Not for vanity, but because polished rails reflected lamplight back into the lens, squeezing every possible candle power from fuel that had to last months. When the rail gleams like burnished coins, you step back, wiping sweat from your brow despite the chilly air. The cats assemble for inspection, Captain Whiskers sniffing the handrail, Midshipman Paws batting at your dangling rag, Old One Eye materializing with the solemnity of a one-eyed magistrate. They seem pleased. The morning passes inspection. Ritual 3. Log the weather. The keeper opens a ledger thicker than a family Bible and positions it beside the galley porthole, where drizzle scribbles faint Morse code. You take dictation while he peers through a handheld aneroid barometer. Pressure rising slightly, wind easing northwest, visibility improving to 2 gulls and a dream, he jokes. You note his words in neat script, then add a personal observation. Cats calm, tails relaxed. He nods. It belongs in the record. Breakfast appears next. Hardtack softened in seal grey coffee and slathered with last season's blackberry jam. You chew slowly, each bite crunching like distant gravel, yet tasting of summer hedgerows. Captain Whiskers sits politely at your boot, eyes fixed on nothing until a crumb falls, at which point her paw flashes faster than thought. Midshipman Paws swats droplets meandering down the porthole, perhaps training for raindrop espionage. Even old One-Eye succumbs to a moment of kittenish glee, pouncing on the stovepipe shadow before composing himself. Plate cleaned, you shoulder a canvas bag filled with ash from the night's stove. Dawn duty 4. Dispose of ashes over the windward cliff, a silent offering to temperamental seas. Outside, the drizzle has thinned to a mist that beads on your eyelashes. You approach the cliff, where waves stall against stone like weary travellers. The ash drifts outward, merges with fog, and disappears, yesterday's fire feeding tomorrow's clouds. Returning along the catwalk, you notice the tower's cylindrical walls now glisten, each rivet wearing a minuscule halo. The storm's residue becomes aesthetic. You inhale deeply, iodine, wet rope, brewing clouds, and feel the lighthouse press its imprint onto your senses. It's a stamp inked in salt water and routine, sealing you to this tiny universe where every detail matters. The barometer's hesitation, a cat's indifferent tail, the exact hue of seal grey coffee. Back in the watchroom, the keeper lowers the wick for daytime burn. The great lens slows, conserving both fuel and majesty. Cats curl on window seats, forming an alphabetical jumble of fur. You pour a final mug, watching steam drift upward until it merges with sunlight at the porthole edge. Outside, a single fishing dory noses through the shallows, its grey-green hull mirroring seaweed beds below. The tower's beam, now reduced to a soft glow, slides across the dory's sail. You wave. The sailor returns the gesture, tiny against the expanse. The morning's chores complete, you settle onto a wooden bench worn smooth by 100 keepers before you. Silence expands. Not empty, but layered. Drip of condensation, slow pulse of distant surf, low croon of the foghorn practicing vowels for later. Cats purr like pocket-sized engines, charging the atmosphere with gentle vigilance. You sip the last of the coffee, letting its salty smoke remind you that comfort needn't be sweet. Sometimes it's just warm, honest, and seal grey. Your morning drifts toward noon, without ever truly brightening. The sky stuck on damp parchment. That's perfect weather, the keeper declares, for a little Victorian gadget testing. From a locker that smells of mothballs and kerosene, he produces a battered cedar box. Inside sleeps a storm glass, an 1850s curiosity that looks like a ship in a bottle distilled into pure speculation. A sealed tube holds clear alcohol flecked with milky crystals, allegedly able to prophesy tempests better than any Admiralty chart. You set the glass on the watchroom sill beside Captain Whiskers. She eyes it with the same disdain she reserves for cucumbers and doorbells, then turns her back, tail flicking like a metronome. Midshipman Paws vaults up to join her, the eager intern to her skeptical professor. The plan is simple. Note the crystal shapes, log every cattail gesture, and see which predicts the next weather shift more accurately. Lighthouse science at slippers and coffee pace. The keeper smooths a yellowed instruction sheet that promises 21 distinct crystal formations. Feathery plumes foretell a fair breeze, leafy branches warn of gales, and, your favourite, confetti bursts invite a merry snow. Right now the liquid shows ragged wisps that refuse to settle. You jot that down, then glance at Captain Whiskers. Her tail forms a lazy question mark, twitching only when a gull screams outside. Midshipman Paws, impressionable soul, copies her twitch a beat late. Data collected. Historians still argue whether these things ever worked, you remark, tapping the glass. Some scholars insist the crystals simply react to temperature. Others point to lighthouse ledgers where keepers swore by the tube, especially when cross-checked against cat behaviour. The keeper shrugs. When shovel meets storm, you trust anything that keeps you dry. To elevate rigour, you use the term lightly, you draw a comparison chart. Column A, storm glass pattern. Column B, Captain Whiskers' tail angle. Column C, Midshipman pauses mood, serene, playful, or fish-demanding. Old One-Eye, snoring on a hemp coil, receives column D for eyelid twitches, rumoured to foretell thunder. Did you know? The Royal Navy issued storm glasses to Arctic expeditions because mercury thermometers froze solid. The camphor and ethanol mixture stayed liquid at -40 degrees Syria, giving sailors at least the illusion of control when the sun vanished for months. A hush settles over the tower. Outside, drizzle thins to a mist so fine it seems whispered rather than dropped. The storm glass clouds clear slightly. The crystals sink like slow snowflakes. Captain Whiskers hops off the sill and saunters toward the spiral stairs, tail rising to full mast. Midshipman Paws scurries after her, nearly tripping over enthusiasm. You log the sudden relocation. Both cats relocating downslope. Possible barometric rise. The keeper calls it a double-blessed prognosis. Following the feline delegation, you reach the lower catwalk just as a cool land breeze slips across the cliffs, scented with distant spruce and wood smoke. Gulls return, circling in lazy figure eights instead of yesterday's panicked scribbles. The world feels as though someone loosened a stiff hinge. You glance back to the lamp room window. The storm glass now shows almost nothing but clarity, a reluctant concession of good weather. Score 1 for fur over chemistry. The keeper adds the verdict to his ledger in precise cursive. 11:41 a.m. Cats accurate, glass tardy. He stamps the note with an inked paw pad kept expressly for moments when science loses to Whiskers. You celebrate with tea, loose leaves boiled in last night's seal grey coffee water, producing a brew that tastes like charred toast dipped in the Atlantic, yet warms you to your socks. Maple leaf biscuits soften just enough to spare your molars. Captain Whiskers patrols the table edge, collecting crumbs as a modest researcher's fee. Midshipman Paws, hopped up on sugar molecules scraped from the tin, chases a sunbeam that slips through the porthole. Old One-Eye blinks once, decides the weather can manage without him, and resumes his thunder-monitoring nap. Sunlight, a rare visitor, parts the clouds in a single glowing column that ignites the sea. The Fresnel lens catches the beam, scattering muted rainbows across the walls. Colour puddles over the cats, sapphire on Captain Whiskers, emerald on Paws, turning the watchroom into a slow-turning kaleidoscope. You remember last night's headbutt of approval and feel absurdly proud, as if you personally polished the sky. Data collection continues in gentle cycles. Crystal check, tail check, biscuit break, repeat. A pattern emerges. Cats signal each pressure shift a good half hour before the storm glass bothers to crystallize. You can almost hear Victorian keepers nodding smugly across time. Yet each method feels incomplete without the other, like left and right shoes of the same superstitious outfit. Outside, waves shrink from steel-grey walls to pewter ripples. Fishing dories venture out, their sails reflecting silver. You wave from the catwalk, tiny figures wave back, grateful the beam is friendly again. The cats approve of your public relations work. Captain Whiskers rubs against your calf, transferring a stripe of salt-stiff fur to your trousers like an autograph you'll forget to wash off. Desk lamp lit. You file the morning's experiment notes. The keeper suggests scheduling a rematch during the next southerly blow, preferably one that arrives at a civil hour, so data sheets won't be blotched by 3 a.m. yawns. You agree. Science, like weather, benefits from decent sleep and a cooperative cat. By early afternoon, the Lighthouse exhales a contented sigh, timbers settling, ropes drying, machinery humming at half speed. The storm glass, now entirely clear, glints in the window like an obedient student finally catching up with the clever kids in the class. You tuck it back into its cedar box, patting the lid as if it too deserves a biscuit for effort. In the comfortable silence that follows, you realize belief might be the real barometer. Crystals, cats, or cloud apps, each only works if someone watches with intent. And you, novice meteorologist of rock and wave, find the watching itself wonderfully soothing. Data points drift through your thoughts like slow-moving gulls. Tail twitch, crystal plume, gust angle, biscuit count. They arrange themselves into a sleepy mosaic, in which every square says, "Relax, you're prepared." The cats, satisfied with both the weather and your note-taking diligence, settle in a heap by the galley stove. Captain Whiskers opens one eye, green marble in lamplight, then closes it, signalling an adjournment. You follow her example, leaning back against the warm ironwork. The tower sways just enough to remind you of lullabies hummed by sea giants. The last thing you see before drifting into a midday doze is the storm glass reflecting three purring silhouettes: Crystal, Cat, and Keeper, perfectly aligned. Dusk glides in on quiet rubber soles, painting the windows violet before settling into ink. The tower's lamp reawakens with its slow, dignified sweep, but tonight the beam seems restless, twitching over the shoals as if searching for something that refuses to be found. You lean against the catwalk rail, warm mug in hand, watching the water darken until it looks like molten hematite. Far beyond the outer reef, a tiny spark ignites. There, then gone, too quick for any passing trawler, too steady for lightning. You blink twice, hold your breath, and the spark blossoms into a pale green orb, floating just above the waves. It drifts sideways, blurs, then splits into two lights that bob in lazy tandem, as though a ghost ship is slow dancing with its reflection. Captain Whiskers appears beside you, silent as an idea, and follows the lights with unblinking eyes. Her tail stiffens, forecast unknown, but curiosity approved. Midshipman Paws pads into view, leans so far over the rail that you snag his scruff before gravity claims him. He hangs like a furry periscope, fascinated by phantoms. The keeper's voice echoes up from below. "Will o' the waves again?" he mutters, climbing to join you. His lantern scatters amber flecks across the whites of his eyes. "Happens on nights like this. Right mix of mist and sea rot. Folks swear it's wrecked schooners still searching for harbour." You sip your drink, this time a weak cocoa because every palate deserves a holiday, and feel cold air reach under your collar. The twin lights grow brighter, narrowing until they resemble the running lamps of a sloop aiming straight for the reef. Yet no hull silhouette follows, no canvas snaps in the windless air. The keeper raises his spyglass, focuses, then lowers it with a sigh. "Nothing solid," he confirms. "Only light." The cats dissent. Captain Whiskers issues a throaty chirrup, the feline equivalent of object approaching. Midshipman Paws fidgets like a dial stuck between channels. Even Old One-Eye, who normally guards the galley like a statue donated by pirates, limps up the stairs to squint at the spectacle. His single iris reflects the glow, turning him into a living signal lamp. You recall sailors' tales told around diesel stoves, stories of phantom flares luring ships onto rocks, of spectral captains waving lanterns from non-existent decks. The term ghost light sounds fanciful until you witness it hanging over black water like an uninvited moon. The lighthouse beam swings across, and for a heartbeat the greenish globes vanish, blink, then reappear in the beam's wake, as if defiantly playing tag with technology. Did you know some researchers blame these lights on piezoelectric flashes from quartz-rich seabeds? Tiny electric arcs triggered by wave pressure that ionize pockets of gas above the surf. It's a theory you'd love to quote, but out here, between cat forecasts and storm glass whispers, science often rides shotgun to wonder. The keeper taps the rail. Time for a lantern patrol. He means you'll circle the tower, check every lens pane for cracks that might fracture the beam, and ensure no soot smudge creates false signals. Cats join the procession uninvited. Captain Whiskers walks ahead, tail raised like a marching banner, while Midshipman Paws zigzags through shadows, chasing reflections you can't see. Old One-Eye takes the rear, steadfast as a one-eyed caboose. Down at the base, wind flutes through mooring rings, playing a minor key lullaby. You step onto the outer walkway, boots clopping wood, slick as eelgrass. The phantom lights drift closer. They sway in unison, splitting and merging like ink droplets in water. You instinctively lift a storm lantern and swing it in warning arcs. Mariners, even spectral ones, deserve a hazard notice. The lights hesitate, then drift starboard, avoiding the reef. Your skin prickles. You and a trio of cats may have just guided ghosts to safety. Back inside the tower, you log the event. The keeper dictates 2046 hours. Twin ghost lights observed moving northeast, diverted by beam and manual lantern. He adds a side note. Cats attentive, tail stiff. Captain Whiskers hops onto the ledger, plants a paw print in ink, and meows once, perhaps her signature on a successful rescue. Night deepens thick as ship tar, and the tower shrinks to an island of golden spokes. Rain becomes a fine drizzle that catches the lantern glow like mirrored dust. The cats settle near the portholes, eyes bright, waiting for the next spectacle. You and the keeper sip broth, fish stock with peppercorns that clink against the ceramic like tiny bells. An hour passes. Clouds part, revealing a sliver of moon. Silver roads stripe the waves. The ghost lights have vanished, but the afterimage lingers in your mind like a soft bruise. You picture an old wooden schooner, crewed by silhouettes, easing past the reef because a beam and a cat guided her. Whether physics or folklore, the result feels benevolent. Captain Whiskers yawns, exposing teeth sharp enough to chew superstition. She bumps her head against your shin, then returns to the window seat, curling into a figure eight of fur and moonlight.
Midshipman Paws follows, kneading the cushion with tiny paws that leave crescent prints in the dust.
Old One Eye remains at the spiral, guarding stairs as though the very idea of ghosts must apply for entry. Outside, the seaplane shifts from ink to velvet. Swells slap the rocks in slow heartbeat rhythms. You match your breathing to the pulse. Inhale with the brake, exhale with the draw. The keeper dims the galley lamp. Darkness folds around you, thick but forgiving, stitched by the lighthouse beam every few seconds. You pause at the watchroom door, listening to the hush. Somewhere out there, maybe miles away, a fisherman sees a glimmer that wasn't on any chart, and wonders. Maybe he steers a bit safer. Maybe he utters a prayer to cats or crystals. Maybe he won't know that your careful note-taking, your simple swing of a lantern, nudged a legend back to sleep. The cats have already disengaged their day shift. Captain Whiskers' breathing slows. Midshipman Paws curls against her belly. Old One Eye perches like a weathered gargoyle and finally closes his lid. You ease into your hammock, the canvas still smelling of salt and wood smoke, and let the tower's gentle sway undo the knots in your shoulders. The last thought before slumber. If ghosts haunt the shoals, perhaps they're only lonely sailors waiting for a beam, a paw print, and a spot of warm broth before they drift back into story. Midnight slips into the tower like a polite intruder, announcing itself with nothing louder than the rustle of charts and the steamy sigh of the kettle. You wake to the keeper's low whistle drifting up the stairwell, a summons to cod oil hour, the lighthouse equivalent of late-night cocoa. The cats need no invitation. Captain Whiskers is already trotting down the steps, claws clicking in anticipation of fishy perfume, while Midshipman Paws bounds after her, tail pinwheeling. Old One Eye pauses only long enough to shoot you a garnish of disdain for oversleeping before he limps majestically behind them. Down in the service room, the keeper decants cod liver oil from a dented tin into thumb-thick glass lanterns. The stuff glows amber even before a match kisses it, and its aroma, equal parts wharf, pharmacy, and antique wardrobe, seeps into every crack. He hands you a lantern. Its warmth greases your palms, and you swear you can taste haddock on the back of your tongue just by breathing. Cats orbit his boots like moons around a fishy planet, brushing ankles and leaving faint crescent hairs behind. The keeper extinguishes the electric lamp. Power is fickle on the Cape, and besides, tradition calls for a softer glow at this hour. Cod oil flames settle into steady teardrops, their light buttery and forgiving, smoothing out the tower's rust scars and your own pillow crease face. Shadows dance on stone walls, making every tool rack look like a row of tall-hat sailors swapping gossip. The keeper beckons you to sit on a barrel, once filled with salt cod, now repurposed as a stool. Its wooden slats creak with brine-scented memories. He clears his throat, voice gravelled by decades of salt spray. Time for the midnight book, he declares, lifting a ragged journal bound in oil-stained canvas. Captain Whiskers leaps onto the barrel lid and curls her tail neatly around her paws, storytime throne assumed. Midshipman Paws flops beside your boot, chin on your laces, eyes wide. Old One Eye claims the opposite barrel, fixing his lone orb on the keeper like a question mark in cat form. Tonight's tale begins the winter of 1904, when a nor'easter smashed an ice schooner against the outer reef. Two fishermen, brothers apparently, clung to a splintered dory drifting toward the rocks, with winds howling like banshees. The keeper on duty couldn't hear their cries over the storm. Enter Josephine, a calico matriarch whose paw prints still decorate page corners of this very ledger. Josephine paced the lantern deck, tail bristled horizontal, an emergency semaphore the keeper recognized from previous drills. The copper, he followed her gaze, spotted the dory's ghostly outline between breakers, and fired a rocket flare. The light guided the half-frozen men to a pocket of calmer water, where a rescue line could reach them. Josephine stayed at the window through the entire haul-in, yowling encouragement, or perhaps just demanding they speed things up so she could resume her nap. Either way, 2 lives credited to one undersized cat in a Lighthouse ledger nobody outside government archives ever bothered to read. Did you know cod liver oil lamps, though notoriously smelly, were prized along the North Atlantic because they burned slower and brighter than the tallow candles they replaced? Old manuals even suggest stuffing a wick with gull feathers to improve flow, an innovation that must have delighted gulls about as much as it delighted whoever cleaned the chimneys afterward. You lean closer to the lantern's glow, picturing Josephine's silhouette against sheets of horizontal snow. The keeper runs a finger beneath her paw signature, a dark smudge stamped next to the word success. He chuckles. Historians still argue whether she sensed the men's voices or saw a shift in wave patterns, but every old-timer agrees no whistle, bell, or crank alarm ever beat a determined cat. The cod oil flame flickers when a draft snakes under the door, carrying the tang of distant icebergs. Captain Whiskers lifts her head, ears swivelling. You half expect another heroic chapter to unfold, but she merely gives Midshipman Paws a desultory lick between the ears. Promotion review postponed. Old One Eye stretches, joints popping like small knots untying, then settles again, eye half-lidded, as though replaying an internal newsreel of all the rescues he's overseen. The keeper's next entry recounts a night when fog grew so thick it muffled even the foghorn. A ship out of Halifax nearly foundered, its captain supposedly following the distant yowls of 2 lighthouse cats who'd slipped outside, perhaps chasing phantom mice, perhaps sensing real peril. Every few paces they stopped to howl, inadvertently forming an aural breadcrumb trail that steered the captain clear of the shoals. The ledger marks that episode. Caterwall navigation, effective. You picture it, moonless black, horn drowned by the fog's damp quilt, only twin shrieks cutting through like wayward violin notes. The mental sound sends a chill skittering across your scalp. You understand why keepers poured fish head trimmings into cats' bowls with ceremonial dignity. Insurance premiums are cheaper when paid in scrap. Lantern light pools across the storm glass box still resting on a shelf from your earlier experiment. Its liquid now glitters crystal clear, almost smug. You can't resist comparing timelines. Cats warn before crystals. Crystals still beat telegraphs in winter. And cod oil lamps outshine both when power flickers. Tools layered over fur instincts. A lighthouse is nothing if not a monument to redundancy. The keeper closes the midnight book and slides it gently back into a waterproof sleeve, as though tucking a child beneath quilts smelling of spruce. Captain Whiskers hops down and strolls toward the galley, tail swishing for supper round 2. Midshipman Paws follows, practicing a heroic strut clearly modelled on Josephine's tail. Old One Eye lingers, his gaze drifting to the door that leads outside, where cold wind buffets the hinges. You wonder if his internal barometer is ticking again, but he yawns. Apparently the only danger tonight is an empty bowl. You and the keeper refill dishes with shredded mackerel stored in brine. Cats cluster, eating with polite smacks that echo in the quiet room. The smell makes your stomach rumble. The keeper hands you a slice of hard cheese and a biscuit. You dip both in lukewarm tea, tasting salt and smoke mixed with faint cardamom. The simplicity feels earned, like a medal for vigilance. In the respite after feeding, you carry a cod oil lantern onto the outer deck. The beam from the main lens sweeps over you, giant compared with the timid glow in your hand, yet somehow both lights complement rather than compete. You set the lantern on a bollard, letting its scent mingle with star-cold air. Somewhere deep in the reeds a lone loon calls, one note, low and haunting, then silence. The sea answers only with gentle slap-swash of tide curling around stone. You imagine the ledger 50 years hence. Lantern placed on deck, cats present. Peace, prevailing. A small entry, but history survives because someone bothered to jot down ordinary moments. Perhaps a future keeper, or ghostly sailor, will thumb through tonight's pages, tracing your ink like you traced Josephine's print, grateful for proof that calm nights happen too. Back inside, cats sprawl in torpid satisfaction, bellies oiled and whiskers glossy. The keeper dims the cod oil lanterns to embers, the fishy glow shrinking to marigold specks. You muse that rescues, debates and legendary cats aside, the true magic of the tower is its invitation to notice. Every scent, every flicker, every purr forming clues to storms or salvation. You stretch, feeling the day's details settle in layers. Polished brass, storm glass clarity, ghost lights diverted, cod oil tales catalogued. You climb to your hammock, heavy-eyed. The tower rocks minutely on its stone foundation. Cod oil fragrance lingers in wooden beams. Cats snore in triplet harmony. The keeper extinguishes the last flame. Sunrise finds you lurching out of the hammock to the brassy clang of a ship's bell alarm. Today is drill day, the keeper announces, and no one, feline or human, gets a sick note. Cats scatter like startled commas, though Captain Whiskers soon doubles back, surveying preparations with the resigned patience of a long-tenured safety inspector. Midshipman Paws unearths a frayed ball of twine from under the chart table, clearly convinced it's essential gear, while Old One-Eye claims a front-row perch on a coil of rescue line, single blue iris reflecting the lens's lazy dawn glint. The keeper hauls out the breeches boy kit, pulleys, a stout hawser rope, a canvas seat that looks suspiciously like a toddler's swing, and enough knots to challenge any scout manual. Your task is simple in theory. Sling the rope across a 30-foot chasm that separates the lighthouse from the sandstone bluff, where supply boats offload crates. In storm season, the narrow timber footbridge can vanish under rogue waves, so keepers rely on this mid-air clothesline to shuttle food, fuel, and occasionally terrified visitors. First, you anchor the shore ward end to a granite bollard drilled deep into the cliff. Then you and the keeper wrestle the opposite end up the spiral stairs, out a gull-streaked casement, and around the lantern deck's steel eye-bolt. Captain Whiskers shadows you with silent disapproval, her tail occasionally flicking against your sleeve, as though testing for tension before a trapeze act. Midshipman Paws offers vocal commentary and chirrups, each note rising whenever you over-tighten or under-tie. Rope taut, the keeper demonstrates the pulley chair, plopping himself inside and rattling across the abyss with all the grace of a dangling sardine tin. The breeze is gentle but insistent, nudging him sideways until his boot heels skim briny spray. He calls back pointers that sound far too cheerful for someone suspended over foamy teeth. Your turn. You wedge yourself into the canvas seat, knees hugged to chest, and shove off. The pulley squeals like a gull with stage fright, and the rope hums a low bass line through leather gloves. Beneath you, water churns against black shale, inhaling and exhaling in white-lipped sighs. Halfway across, you remember to breathe, exhale, and glance down. Silhouettes of kelp sway like giant question marks, uninterested in mortal suspense. Cats maintain their posts. Captain Whiskers paces the lantern deck rail, eyes fixed on your shoelaces as if measuring lateral drift. Midshipman Paws sprints along the interior stairs, shadowing your traverse one floor below. Old One-Eye remains with the coil, the stoic dispatcher waiting to reel you back if something snaps. Hand over hand, you reach the far post. Plant both boots on sandstone and whoop! A burst of glee snatched instantly by the wind. Out of habit, you log the time on a clipboard, 39 seconds door to door. Did you beat the record? The keeper shouts affirmative across the gap, sea spray sparkling in morning sun like spontaneous applause. Did you know breeches buoy systems were standard issue at remote Commonwealth lighthouses by the 1870s? Designed originally for shipwreck rescues, the contraption saved more lighthouse groceries than sailors, ferrying everything from barrels of lamp oil to Christmas turkeys wrapped in tarpaulin. You send over a sack of coal next, followed by crates of canned peaches rediscovered in the cellar. Each load swings across, rattling against pulleys, trailed by curious gulls. Captain Whiskers supervises unloading, hopping atop every crate to stamp an invisible customs seal. Midshipman Paws attempts to ride back in the empty boy seat, but gets scooped up before he can showcase aerial acrobatics. The keeper chuckles, tucks the squirming apprentice into his oilskin coat, and returns hand over hand, kitten hood ornament poking out the collar. When drills end, rope slackens in the sunlight, glinting like a giant violin string waiting for an encore. You coil excess line, muscles warm, and sense the tower itself stands straighter, bones stretched after night-long repose. Cats convene in the watchroom for after-action review, sprawling on the chart table. Captain Whiskers flops onto her side, pawing at the breeches buoy logbook as if initialing the entry. Midshipman Paws gnaws a pencil stub. Old One Eye perches beside the storm glass, asserting seniority. Rumours arrive with midday tea, piping hot, brackish as ever, delivered by the keeper alongside a folded scrap of newsprint dropped off by passing fishermen. Headline: Automation expansion slated for maritime beacons. The article hints that mechanical lights and remote sensors may soon replace flesh and blood crews. You read the words twice, feeling the room tilt in a way no lighthouse should. Automation means fewer hands, maybe no cats, and certainly none of this rope bridge theatre. Captain Whiskers noses the paper, then turns her back, tail twitching a dismissal of any future lacking warm laps and late-night cod. Midshipman Paws pounces the headline, shredding both letters and symbolism with kittenish zeal. The keeper sighs through his moustache. Machines don't polish brass, he mutters, and they surely don't sniff storms. You imagine a spotless, catless tower humming on solar panels, efficient, silent, heartbreakingly dull. Still, rumours spread faster than smoke. By afternoon, you swear the gulls call the word automation, and even the storm glass seems unsettled, tiny feathers of crystal drifting without forecast. Yet the chores persist. Lampwick trimmed, lens wiped, biscuits baked in iron pans until the galley smells like molasses and home. Cats resume patrol, perhaps sensing that regularity is the best rebuttal to change. Before dusk, you and the keeper conduct one last rope bridge run, ferrying yourselves across with mugs of tea, balanced dangerously in mittened hands because why not? The ocean below claps approval. Captain Whiskers watches from the catwalk, eyes slitted, as if photographing this scene for a future where such moments need remembering. Midway you pause, legs dangling, tea sloshing, and look back at the tower glowing gold against a lavender sky. For a breath, everything feels suspended. Rope, you, rumours, future, held in the gentle balance of sea breeze and feline oversight. Back on solid stone, you log the day's feats. 8 cargo runs, 0 mishaps, 1 new speed record, 3 alarmed gulls, countless purrs of encouragement. You add a note. Cats vital to morale. Whether archivists agree is irrelevant. The truth vibrates in every whisker twitch. Night creeps up behind a bank of low clouds. Lantern light ignites anew, and drills give way to quiet conversation over bowls of chowder thick enough to slow spoons. Cats curl beside the stove, exhausted from supervisory excellence. The rope outside hums softly, still strung across moonlit nothing, a silver line connecting present diligence to all future keepers who might need reminders that machines alone cannot replace warm instincts, or the casual heroics of a cat riding shotgun in a keeper's coat. As steam fogs the porthole, you trace a finger across the glass, doodling an impromptu constellation shaped like a breeches buoy chair. Captain Whiskers cracks an eye, approves with a blink, then drifts back to sleep. The keeper raises his mug. To drills done right, rumours left outside, and rope bridges that never forget how to sing. You clink ceramic, letting the melody of rope, wind and distant surf settle into the night's first lullaby. Low tide arrives with the squelch of seaweed cork mats and the soft clack of wave-tossed driftwood. You and the keeper tramp along the crescent of shingle beneath the lighthouse, rubber boots sinking into sludge the colour of forgotten coffee. The overnight swell flung up half a century's souvenirs, barnacled crates, shattered boys, and most intriguing, a glimmering constellation of glass bottles wedged between rocks, tiny green planets awaiting discovery. Captain Whiskers takes the lead, paws silent on kelp-slick stone. Midshipman Paws follows, tail vibrating like a telegraph needle. Old One Eye stands sentry on a boulder, watching gulls quarrel over the flotsam. A bottle near your toe flashes emerald in the dawn. You pry it loose, feeling the gritty suction pop like a cork. Inside, a curled scrap of paper huddles against a rust-pitted nail that once served as ballast. Back at the tower, you fetch the breech's buoy line, now moonlighting as a makeshift haul strap, and hoist your finds to the lantern room, safe from rogue tides. 10 bottles in total, each sealed with wax, tar, or faded cork smelling of ancient rum. The keeper lines them up on the chart table like recruits awaiting inspection. Captain Whiskers hops onto the table, sniffs each neck, and settles beside the oldest, her purr rumbling a verdict. Start here. You ease free a brittle stopper. The glass exhales a breath of salt and centuries, and the paper unfurls with surprising grace, inked in meticulous copperplate. To my dearest Isla, should this reach thy shore. The letter recounts a sailor marooned by a hurricane in 1912, promising he will return after the storm, or haunt the surf if he cannot. A postscript adds almost sheepishly, trust the cats at the beacon. They know the sea's mind. You and the keeper exchange glances. Captain Whiskers merely blinks, unsurprised that a long-gone mariner knew her people's reputation. Next bottle, next confession. This one dated 1947, penned by a lighthouse assistant on Sable Island, who feared automation would steal his post. If progress comes, he writes, may future keepers remember the solace of a well-timed tail flick. Midshipman Paws bats at the page, depositing a soggy paw print as an unofficial co-signature. Did you know the world's oldest verified message in a bottle spent 108 years at sea before washing ashore in the North Sea in 2015? It was part of a drift pattern study. Its finder earned a sixpence reward promised in 1906. Proof that delayed mail can still pay out if you're patient. Bottle 3 contains a sketch. A rough charcoal drawing of twin ghost lights, eerily similar to the ones you deflected 2 nights ago. On the margin, the artist scrawled, historians still argue whether these corpse candles are gas, souls, or tricks of tired eyes, but I swear they steered my schooner clear of death. Evidence, perhaps, that folklore keeps better in salt water than any scientific instrument. The keeper logs each discovery in the Midnight Book's daytime cousin, adding notes about bottle thickness, barnacle growth, and, at Captain Whiskers' insistence, whether the contents mention cats. 5 of the 10 do. One mourns a calico named Josephine, callback to the 1904 rescue heroine, claiming her grand kitten now guards a beacon near Halifax. Captain Whiskers lifts her chin at that, as though filing genealogical paperwork. Opening the 7th bottle proves tricky. The wax has fused with glass. You warm it near the galley stove, and cod oil aroma mingles with paraffin until you could swear the scent itself is spelling words. Inside lies not a letter, but a pressed sprig of rose campion, crimson intact despite decades underwater. Affixed is a tag. For the lighthouse cats who kept me sane, J.D. 1978. No address, no plea, just gratitude delivered by tide. The tower hums with stories now, each page a tide pool reflecting earlier sections of your vigil. Breech's buoys, ghost lights, Josephine's paw print. You feel threads knitting across eras, laced by salt, ink, and whisker lore. Captain Whiskers walks the bottle line, tail brushing glass like a tuning fork. When she pauses, you know which message comes next. The 9th bottle, sleek, dark, modern, contains a photograph folded tight. It shows an automated tower, scaffolding still in place, but in the foreground, fresh paw prints traced across wet cement. On the back, a note. Efficiency may switch on the bulb, but cats keep the light alive. You read it twice, heart snagging on the echo of yesterday's rumour article. Machines may arrive, yes, but paw prints have a way of appearing anyway. Finally, the 10th. Cork dryer's tinder. It slides out with a sigh. The letter inside is blank except for a single line. Add your own tale. The keeper chuckles. Looks like the sea's inviting us to participate. You fetch a fountain pen rescued from the storm glass experiment, and on that salt-frayed parchment write 2025, Fog Watcher, Rookie Cat Listener, convinced that listening keeps the coast safer than any algorithm. Beneath, you coax Captain Whiskers's paw onto an ink pad. She tolerates exactly one press before retiring to the stove. Her print blooms beside your signature, twin symbols against automation's erasure. Sealing the bottle anew, you step onto the dusk-pink catwalk. Waves glitter like silver scales under the relit beam. You kiss the glass for luck, tastes of salt and possibility, and sling it seaward. The bottle arcs, catches the last copper sun, then splashes into its wandering classroom, ready to tutor some future dreamer on cats and lighthouses, and why both matter. Back inside, you tuck the other letters into acid-free sleeves, cataloguing them by moon phase, tide height, and feline reaction. The keeper slots them into a cedar drawer alongside storm glass logs and cod oil receipts, the oddest library card catalogue on earth. Mission done. Cats gather for a supper of mashed sardines sprinkled with crumbed hardtack, a celebratory feast for successful beachcombing. Old One-Eye, having contributed stoic morale, receives the choicest chunk of belly meat. His purr vibrates the floorboards like distant diesel. Later, mug of seal grey coffee in hand, you lean against the porthole, watching the bottle's tiny wake until darkness swallows it. Somewhere out there another keeper, or curious dolphin, may find it in a week or a century. You imagine them tracing your ink, puzzling at the paw print, and smiling, because cats always find a way back into the narrative. Captain Whiskers hops onto the sill beside you, green eyes reflecting the lighthouse beam's ghostly ribbon. She does not purr or flick her tail. She simply sits in companionable silence, as if acknowledging that some messages need no bottle, no ink, no scholarly debate, just witness. The beam sweeps, the sea answers, and the night folds around the tower like parchment, ready for the next story. A week slides by in soft, briny increments, and the rumour of automation hardens into reality, with the arrival of a flat-deck barge bristling with cranes, crates, and men in high-vis jackets who call the lighthouse by its serial number instead of its name. You stand on the catwalk with Captain Whiskers draped across your shoulders like a living scarf, watching forklifts unload steel cabinets the size of small cars, batteries, generators, satellite uplinks, and something labelled Auto Beacon EMC4. Every box promises to outshine lamp oil, outrun cod-fueled cats, and outlast human eyelids. The keeper greets the engineers with courtesy brewed as strong as his coffee, but you see the flinch when they unspool fibre optic cable across the very spot Josephine once paced to save sailors. Midshipman Paws attempts to help by pouncing the blue sheath. An engineer shoos him with a laugh that sounds like a door closing. Old One-Eye perches atop a coil of retired breeches buoy rope, glaring through salt fog at the buzzing drill motors. Inside, the lantern room becomes an operating theatre. Technicians remove the brass clockwork you wound each dawn, laying gears on foam padding like organs. The Fresnel lens stays, for now, but its rotation will soon be driven by a silent servo. The keeper signs paperwork with a blunt pencil, scrawling his name beneath phrases like handover protocol and remote operation. His shoulders slope as if the whole tower has leaned a fraction south. Your tasks shift to packing. Brass-polished tins kissed goodbye, storm glass packed in bubble wrap, cod oil tins stamped obsolete. You wrap the midnight book in oilskin, though nobody asked you to. Captain Whiskers supervises, tail flicking each time you hesitate over an object with history etched into its patina. You catch yourself polishing the breeches buoy pulley one last time, muscle memory refusing to accept redundancy. Did you know the first fully automated lighthouse in Canada came online in 1924, yet complaints of dimmer beams and sluggish emergency response poured in for years until part-time keepers were quietly rehired. Progress, it seems, sometimes returns for a service call. By afternoon, solar panels bloom across the roof like black lily pads, drinking weak daylight. A technician in a harness installs laser bird deterrents, red beams that sweep the sky, promising to keep gull droppings off the expensive glass. The gulls respond by roosting on the crates of unused hardware, shrieking approval or mockery. It's hard to tell. Captain Whiskers arches her back at the crimson flickers, but holds her ground. A cat, after all, does not abandon her post for disco lights. With installation complete, the auto beacon warms up. LEDs brighter than magnesium, lenses rotating with frictionless grace. A hum almost inaudible, yet eerily clinical. The technicians cheer, snap selfies and radio headquarters. The keeper remains silent, running a thumb along a groove worn by generations of boot soles on the iron stair. You feel the tower's pulse change, faster, digitized, skipping the comforting tick you've grown to trust. Sunset comes in copper streaks, and the new beacon fires its first automated flash, sterile, flawless, and heartbreakingly impersonal. The engineers pack up, promising maintenance drones will visit quarterly. The barge departs, engines churning water that glows electric mint beneath the beacon's glare. Silence returns, but it's the brittle silence of a server room, not the breathing hush of wood and oil. Night deepens. You brew coffee, electric kettle now, no cod aroma, and pour 2 mugs. The keeper lifts his with a sigh. Feels like drinking instant nostalgia, he says. You raise yours in silent sympathy. Cats cluster beneath the table, uncertain. Midshipman Paws sniffs the strange hum in the air, ears flackening. Old One-Eye's tail thumps once. A judge's gavel. Captain Whiskers paces the hallway, searching for the missing heartbeat of gears. You retire early, hammock swaying in blue LED spill. Hours later, a metallic clunk jolts you awake. The beacon has frozen mid-rotation, one panel stuck facing shore. An alarm beeps, a flat, computerized chirp that lacks the urgency of a cat's yowl. You throw on boots. The keeper is already at the console, prodding touchscreens that flash error codes. Outside, fog slides in thick as memory. With the beam trapped, half the shoals lie in shadow. Instinct overrides training. You sprint to the manual crank still bolted behind a cabinet, a relic the engineers forgot to remove. Captain Whiskers darts after you, leaps onto the lever, and clamps her teeth around the rope pulled clear of dust. Together, you wrench the crank. Rust protests, but the lens shudders, obediently turning a few degrees. Midshipman Paws scrambles up to add 10 ounces of feline ballast. Old One-Eye howls encouragement down the stairwell. With each heave, the beam crawls across the water, repainting danger zones in living gold. 5 minutes feel like a century, arms burning, foghorn moaning concern. Then, a reply. A trawler's horn bursts through the murk, close but safe. Its deck lights sweep past, crew waving shadows of gratitude. You slump against the rail, lungs soaked in salt and adrenaline. Captain Whiskers releases the rope, giving it a final contemptuous swat. You reset the crank, check the console, error cleared. The servo whirs back to life, perhaps chastened by salty heroics. You note the time in the log, penning, manual override engaged by keeper and cats, beam restored, vessel avoided hazard. You don't add automation 0, Whiskers 1, but the sentiment hovers between the lines. Dawn reveals paw prints across the touchscreen, Captain Whiskers' midnight skirmish with technology. Funny, $1 billion satellite link can't wipe a single saltwater print without streaking. You leave them, a feline graffiti tag declaring continued jurisdiction. The keeper radios headquarters, phrasing the incident delicately. Momentary mechanical stasis resolved with legacy procedures. Translation? We cranked it by hand because a cat told us to. They thank him, schedule analysis, and advise keeping the manual crank accessible. For now. You and the keeper share a grin wider than the shoal. For now is all any lighthouse ever promises. Later, you gather the cats on the watchroom bench, doling out celebratory sardine strips. Captain Whiskers accepts first, whiskers shimmering like victory streamers. Midshipman Paws executes a triumphant biscuit-making routine on your sleeve. Old One-Eye sits regal, tail curled over ancient secrets. And somewhere in the footnotes of central office data logs, tonight's anomaly will appear as a blip, resolved, insignificant. But you know better. You felt the tower's true heart restart under feline command, gear teeth catching the rhythm of wind and wave. Automation may evict payroll positions, but it can't foreclose legacy. Paw prints keep appearing. Grease smudges become runes, and the lens still listens for the tap of claws on iron. You sip reheated coffee, rehearse how you'll add this episode to the midnight book, perhaps wedged between Josephine's heroics and the ghostlight diversion. Another chapter proving that lighthouses are less about bulbs and more about living sentinels, furry, stubborn, gloriously analog. Captain Whiskers hops onto your lap, curls into a comet of orange fur, and closes her eyes. Beam or no beam, she'll be here tomorrow night, ready to audit the horizon and swat awake any gadget that forgets its job. Dawn seeps through the portholes like watered-down lemonade, and you stretch in the galley, legs wobbly from the night's emergency heroics, but mind clear as the freshly rinsed sky. Captain Whiskers perches on the windowsill, eyes half closed, basking in a beam of timid sunlight that has finally remembered how to reach the Cape. The auto beacon hums along, obedient now, perhaps chastened by feline quality control, but you can't help noticing that every technician label has acquired a faint orange paw smudge, legacy signing its name in bright, indelible shorthand. You brew an old-fashioned pot of seal grey coffee on the backup stove, call it a victory lap for tradition, and carry 2 mugs up the spiral. Halfway you pause where Josephine's 1904 paw print was etched. Someone, not you, has chalked a tiny arrow pointing to Captain Whiskers' 2025 print on the touchscreen above, linking century to century in one tidy timeline. The keeper waits atop the lantern deck, leaning against the rail, gaze lost in that impossible place where sea and sky pretend to merge. He takes the mug, raises it in salute, and murmurs, "Not bad," for analog reinforcement. Below, Midshipman Paws chases sun speckles that ricochet off the lens, and Old One-Eye naps so deeply he might be downloading the next weather update straight from ancestral cloud servers. You start wiping salt spray from the glass panes, habit more than necessity, and your reflection joins thousands of keepers who have done the same swipe since whale oil days. Captain Whiskers hops onto the sill beside your rag, tail curling into the figure-8 nod she vases for satisfactory routines. The auto beacon's servo clicks. You feel no resentment, only a quiet certainty that gears and code are welcome, provided they respect whiskered oversight. Did you know modern shipping manuals still advise keeping a ship's cat for pest control, even aboard steel container vessels, because rodent gnaw damage to fiber optic cable remains a multi-million-dollar nightmare? Silicon Valley solves many problems, but purring pest control is undefeated. You remember the message in a bottle urging future custodians to add your own tail. You added one. Last night carved another, the manual crank, the trawler's horn, the ancient/future alliance of muscle and claw. Somewhere in a server farm, a log file records anomaly resolved. But here, your shoulders recall the weight of that lever, and salt crystals on your gloves glitter like tiny medals. Historians still argue whether cats genuinely comprehend the mechanics of light-keeping. You muse aloud, tightening a wing nut the engineers left loose. The keeper laughs. Comprehend? Maybe not. Enforce? Definitely. He nods toward Captain Whiskers, who has just swatted the nut twice. Torque test passed. You descend to the supply shed, retrieving an old enamel saucer chipped at the rim. It once belonged to Josephine. At least, that's the legend. You wash it, set it on the catwalk just outside the control room, and fill it with fresh water. A ritual, yes, but also a memo to whoever replaces you next month or next decade. A lighthouse runs smoother when a cat is in charge, and the cost of entry is one clean dish. Captain Whiskers drinks first, then steps aside so Midshipman Paws can paddle in it like a toddler at the beach. Old One-Eye arrives last, laps with stately reserve, and gazes seaward as if blessing new horizons. Inside, you and the keeper draft a final ledger note. Beacon automated. Resident cats retained. Manual crank, tested and trusted. You add a postscript, saucer place starboard side for luck, and press Captain Whiskers's paw into the ink pad. She leaves a neat print, then flops onto the page, smearing the edge into an inky flourish, impossible for any bureaucrat to straighten. Perfect. Afternoon drift. Gulls settle on photovoltaic panels, ignoring red lasers until a single warning flash convinces them to roost instead on the old brass ventilator, where no one minds. The beam turns, fault-free. The cats sunbathe in rotating ribbons of light that paint their fur like shifting stained glass. You sit on the deck, letting that same light warm your eyelids. Time stretches, unhurried. Technology hums, tradition purrs. You realize they're not rivals, merely different instruments in the same weather symphony. Beyond the reef, a modern cargo ship glides west. Through binoculars, you spot a calico silhouette on its bridge deck, tail batting the breeze. The officer beside her places a dish by his boot. You grin. Word travels fast on salt and superstition. Evening tiptoes in, lavender and cool. You polish the last smudge from the lens, then rest your forehead against the glass, feeling the tower's heartbeat steady and strong. Gears, servo, purr, wave, wind, repeat. Captain Whiskers joins you, pressing a warm flank against your calf. No words, just the shared certainty that guardianship endures, coded in claws and recorded in paw-printed ledgers. You stand a little taller, lighthouse keeper of both copper wires and soft whiskers, ready for the duck. Slowly, softer than tide foams sliding over smooth stones, the final hours of night settle around the tower. The beacon's glow stretches far but speaks in whispers now, its rhythm gentle, its duty assured. You feel the hush seep into your muscles, coaxing every knot to loosen, every thought to drift like seagrass in a moonlit current. The cats have tucked themselves into quiet commas, Captain Whiskers curled at the foot of your hammock, midshipman paws nested in a coil of line that rocks ever so slightly with the tower's pulse. Old One Eye perched high on the windowsill, a single guardian star keeping watch while the rest of the sky exhales. The sea outside is calm enough to remember lullabies, soft lap, softer sigh, distant murmur of pebbles shuffled by slow waves. Each sound arrives spaced and rounded, inviting your breathing to mirror the same unhurried cadence. In and out, in and out. Lamp glass glints above, casting faint amber rings that drift across wooden beams like gentle clock hands, marking seconds not in urgency but in reassurance. You let your gaze unfocus, allowing those rings of light to blur, to soften, until they become pale halos that float behind your eyelids even after you close them. The tower sways with a motion so slight it feels imagined, yet that subtle rock steadies you, as though the whole lighthouse has become the cradle of the coastline, holding you safe in its lantern-lit embrace. Listen, the foghorn is silent tonight, giving the world permission to rest. Let every trace of tension ebb with the receding tide, leaving only warmth, the hush of purring guardians, and the certainty that somewhere out there, a saucer waits, a light turns, and the sea, content for now, slumbers with you.